Hey guys, what is going on? So I just wanted to talk about the ideal body fat percentage in terms of building actual muscle, as well as the kind of calorie surplus that you want to be shooting for to maximize muscle growth as well. Okay, so the latter part of that is going to vary from person to person. I think the range of calories in terms of surplus that you should be eating is going to vary depending on your goals, as well as where you're at as, are you advanced, are you intermediate, whatever that may be. But in terms of the body fat percentage range, I just kind of want to give a quick answer and then kind of elaborate on why I think that is the case. So usually what I've found with myself, with a lot of other people that I found, a lot of elite naturals that I know, it seems that a higher body fat percentage range is going to be more conducive to building muscle tissue. And that range is usually kind of in the high teens in terms of body fat percentage. So 16, 17, 18, 19%. And when I say this, a lot of people are, they really don't understand body fat percentages. And obviously this is not something you can necessarily teach. You just kind of have to have an eye for it through experience. But a lot of people think that they are much leaner than they actually are. Okay, so you may actually be in this body fat percentage range, but you think you're 10%. And this is very common. I see a lot of people who don't even have abs who think they're near 10%. So understanding that is, obviously crucial in terms of understanding this kind of guidance here. But a lot of people, really think that there is something to, getting really lean, being able to build more muscle in that kind of lower end range due to the improved insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. When the reality is that the best way to actually improve insulin sensitivity is going to be just by putting on muscle. And so if we can do the thing that's going to allow us to put on the most muscle, which in my opinion is being that high teen, even low 20 body fat percentage range, that's going to be most conducive to actually building more muscle, which is going to improve our insulin sensitivity over time. You can also do your 10-minute walks after your meals, specifically high carb meals, to help in terms of actually utilizing that insulin. Obviously there are glucose disposal agents that you can use as supplements as well. I do both of these things while I'm bulking. I feel like it helps quite a bit. But these are things that you can do while you're bulking even. So you don't have to worry about, oh man, I'm 12% body fat. This is going to be the best insulin sensitivity. Therefore, I'm going to build the most muscle. And a lot of people think that that rebound effect that they get after they, come out of a cut or they've been in kind of this lean phase of their life, they come out of that and they instantly put on a lot of weight due to carbs, due to water, potentially more sodium intake, and obviously just being in a calorie surplus in general. Oftentimes you'll find that you'll put on a ton of weight initially and you're like, well, I don't really seem to be getting much fatter, so this must be muscle. And the reality is, yes, it is lean, but it's mostly water retention, right? So you will build some muscle. And also, if you're coming from a depleted state, potentially you've lost some muscle while you've been cutting or while you've been lean, because that is not conducive of an anabolic environment, for your muscle tissue. In that instance, you may get a rebound effect and build a muscle that you had once lost. Plus get a lot of, water weight gain. So you're going to look more full. You're going to have more weight. So you're going to look better overall. And then if you tack on some fat tissue on top of that, it's really not going to make much of a difference. And so the vast majority of that weight that you gain, some of it may be muscle, majority is probably water, and then a little bit of fat. You're going to think that you're just growing really lean. And this is something, a lot of people think that's the best environment to actually, build muscle. And that's just not the case from what I've found. So this is true in terms of not only that initial rebound effect, but then let's say, you rebound up and you're 13% body fat. What about that range from 13% to like 16, 17, 18%? What happens in that time period? And what I found for myself is that a lot of the gains that I make are pretty slow during this period. Now, sure, I'm still in a calorie surplus. I still am getting excess nutrients, which is very important. But I find that I usually get a second wind in my bulk once I get to these higher teens in terms of body fat percentage. So, what ends up happening is you might get that initial rebound, then you might have a little bit slow results depending on what range is ideal for you. But then once you get to a point where your body is really firing on all cylinders, you're getting maxed out energy from the carbs, you're getting, high testosterone production via, increased fats, you're getting plenty of protein, you have all the calories that you need and then some with the bulking, and you have everything in check there. Your gym performance is really good to the increased energy and everything like that. When that's been clicking for a while and, you're back to the level where you've built up the muscle that you potentially lost, when you have everything going in that regard and you have this excess body fat, so your body knows that it has plenty of energy plus the calorie surplus, that's really where I think you have the most abundance in terms of being able to allocate the resources that you're getting from this calorie surplus, from this higher body fat percentage. And that's going to be the most anabolic environment possible. So that's kind of what I've experienced in terms of muscle gain. Obviously, we've talked about the, improved insulin sensitivity that you get from more muscle tissue. So even if in that, kind of short-term period, your insulin sensitivity is not going to be as good at a higher body fat percentage, down the line, it's going to be better and better as you gain that muscle tissue, as you potentially do those 10-minute walks, and then it's going to be better for you in the future. So that is really where I find the best muscle gains. Obviously, your strength gains are going to be better there as well because your leverages are going to be improved. And usually those things kind of tie in with one another. They're not 100% correlated. It's not like just because you're getting stronger means you're getting bigger, but it does help. And so you're getting all those extra resources, all the extra macro and micronutrients from more food, plus the overall quantity of food that you have matters. So if you're eating, if you're eating a 300 calorie surplus at one level, but it's 4,000 calories versus earlier in your bulk, you're only eating 3,200 and it was even a higher surplus, well, you may be more anabolic in that, phase later down the line because you have more total calories to work with, which you're able to allocate towards more nutrients across the board. Okay. So that's kind of my opinion on that. That's what I've really found for myself is I'll have this period where I'm really not gaining as much as I would like. And then boom, I explode once I get to that higher teen range, which is a phase that I kind of just got out of right now. And I had really good growth during that period. And so when I cut, I actually only cut to about 15% body fat just so I could rebound right out of that and get some really good gains right away. So obviously I did have to take some time to, accumulate some of that muscle back, but then I had some really good gains and I didn't have to wait multiple months into my bulk to really start seeing those. So that's been really good for me. In terms of calorie surplus, in my opinion, it makes the most sense to have the highest calorie surplus that you can handle, but you also want to have a rate of weight gain that is acceptable where you can do it for a long period of time. So I like to actually slowly have this change over time. So when you're newer to the gym, you can have better muscle gains, newbie gains, where you can handle a better calorie surplus. But once you're in that intermediate stage, you're kind of at this level where one, you can't get away with that big of a calorie surplus without putting on a ton of fat. And two, you don't have the ability to cut fat as effectively when you're coming back down because you're not as big, right? Whereas if you're more advanced and you have a ton of muscle tissue, your ability to burn calories at rest, but more specifically just doing everyday activities, is going to be increased substantially. So the fat accumulation that you achieve when you're advanced is pretty easy to cut down, whereas when you're intermediate, you don't have quite as much muscle tissue to work with. And your rate of weight gain, in terms of muscle gain is not going to be nearly as good as the newbie phase. So what I find is that, I say you should try and work up to, kind of increasing your ratio of time that you spend bulking versus time that you spend cutting. But when you're not in an advanced stage, you can't really do that without accumulating a good amount of fat. So what I find is that as an intermediate, you're going to have a little bit easier time putting on muscle than somebody who's more advanced. So you don't need as big of a calorie surplus. And then again, you're going to have to end up cutting that weight at some point, and it's going to be more difficult for an intermediate lifter. As you get more advanced, you're going to be able to look significantly better because you have more muscle tissue. Your body fat percentage is going to equate to a larger amount of fat mass. So if you have, 20% body fat at 200 pounds, right? That amount of fat mass is going to be smaller than if you had 20% body fat at 250. And you'll probably look better at 250 as well because you'll have more muscle tissue. So I'm not saying you're going to gain 50 pounds of muscle or whatever, but that point is just to kind of hammer home that, you're going to look better. You're going to have more actual fat mass when you are at that more advanced level, but you're still going to be able to actually cut that fat more effectively when you're more advanced. So I would say working up slowly over the years, increasing your calorie surplus over time to get to the point where when you're more advanced, you need all the help that you can get to be able to put on muscle tissue at an effective rate. And this, I think, is done via a high calorie surplus, but it's not as necessary until you're more advanced and you put on a lot of muscle tissue. So I think that's a trap that naturals fall into, is that they actually decrease their calorie surplus over time because they get a higher ratio of fat relative to muscle. And so they actually decrease their calories, in terms of a net surplus because they think that, I'm getting too fat. when in reality, you actually need a higher surplus to be able to support more muscle growth because your body's actively fighting against you to be putting on this new muscle tissue because you're getting so advanced, the adaptations are not going to be as easy. And so you need to fight for every pound of muscle that you actually get. So that's kind of what I've been doing in my more advanced stage of lifting. And I've actually been accelerating my muscle gain in recent years by increasing the calorie surplus that I have and also increasing the duration. So that not only gives me that ability to get to a higher body fat percentage, and I have to accept that, but then you have to actually cut quickly to be able to get rid of that body fat in a reasonable amount of time so you can go back into bulking and repeat that process. Okay, so the calorie surplus amount is going to vary significantly. I usually go for about a 500 calorie surplus, but for a smaller person that may be less. Like I said, it's going to be different for an intermediate versus an advanced, but I think that keeping those things in mind while also understanding that being at that higher body fat percentage is going to be more conducive to actual muscle growth. You know, both of those things combined kind of lead to try and stretch out your bulks more and more over time and make your cuts more rapid over time. And then it'll be easier to kind of spend more time in an anabolic environment, put on more muscle tissue every single year and make more progress as you get more advanced, and really kind of stack that muscle over time. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. I'll keep you updated and I'll talk to you soon.